I'd like to thank California Humanities for making this project possible. You can help us and California Humanities with future programming by giving us your feedback. We have a quick survey available also at the library table that you can fill out after today's program. So before I introduce Susan, I just want to take a quick moment to acknowledge all of Susan's hard work, dedication, and patience with the library during this program. This series is truly better because of Susan. So I just wanted to thank Susan so much for all of her work on this. So without further ado, Susan Hasegawa is a professor at San Diego City College and teaches U.S. history and Asian American history. She's also the past chairperson of the History and Political Science Department. Susan has researched and wrote on the Japanese American experience in San Diego for the past 20 years and curated numerous exhibits locally. Based on oral history interviews and archival photographs, her community history, Japanese Americans in San Diego, was published in 2008. She's also written articles for the Japanese American National Museum and consulted on numerous projects concerning the Japanese American experience for Oxford Publishing, University Press of Colorado, and the Old Globe Theater. She has a master's degree in history from San Diego State University and a master's degree in international affairs from UC San Diego. In her spare time, she likes to scuba dive, both locally and in tropical waters, whenever she can get away. She grew up in Hana, a small town in East Maui, but has called San Diego home since moving here for graduate school in 1989. Susan was an accomplished hula dancer with 10 years of experience as a child and teenager, but still cannot follow the simplest dance steps at Oban, a Japanese summer festival similar to Dia de los Muertos. Please join me in welcoming Susan Hasegawa.
Thank you, Moni. And I'm very grateful and honored that they invited me in to be part of this program and also part of the exhibit or part of coordinating the exhibit. So welcome, and it's so nice to see everybody here and not at the Padres game. And glad you got into the parking lot. So today we're going to be looking at then Japanese Americans in San Diego. Okay, and if you take a look at the first slide, this is the Kia and Hosaka families picnicking in front of the wall of Mission San Diego de Alcala, circa about 1916, 17, or 18. And so at that time you have immigrant Issei families with their Nisei children, and they're farming in Mission Valley. So not only are they in Mission Valley, they're down in the Tijuana River Valley, they're up in Oceanside, and they're also fishing. And this is an unabashed plug for my book, Japanese Americans in San Diego. And if you take a look at the photo, and if any of you have driven across the Coronado Bridge, under the Coronado Bridge, then there used to be a fishing cannery, also with the dock, and right about where you had Park de Sol, there was also, going into the bay, was called Fish Camp. You had one fish camp then right near the bridge, and another farther north up the bay. And if you take a look, they're basically shacks across the bay, and then that's where Japanese American families lived. And this elder fisherman then would be babysitting then some of the younger kids. So just a couple vocabulary. Issei, first generation, those are the immigrants, men who came over and then brought over their wives, picture brides. So the Issei men, Issei women. Nisei, the second generation, they're the American-born, American citizen children of Issei. Then you get into Sansei, the third generation. They're coming of age in the 1960s and 70s, and they are politically active and organizing. We're going to get talking about them. Now, at the same time that you have then Issei immigrants coming to San Diego, okay, you also have then a backlash against them, anti-immigrant laws. During World War II, we'll get into that. Incarceration, forced evacuation, and then also the return to San Diego, what happens after the war. And finally, we're going to look at the Japanese American legacy in San Diego. So according to the San Diego County Census, the first Japanese are coming in, trickling in the late 1880s. Okay, the official census says in 1926. By 1910, you have 526. Okay, the late Don Estes, who was a pioneering scholar in San Diego Japanese American history, would suggest that this was actually quite low. Okay, since census counters are very much not counting some of the immigrant population. And if you take a look at a lot of the Issei bachelors, they're working on the railroads. They are migrant farmers. You have then Issei farmers getting into celery, winter celery in Chula Vista. Okay, they're studying truck farms in Mission Valley. They're also involved in fishing. And what happens in the 1910s is that at the same time that you have World War I, things like meatless Mondays, wheatless Wednesdays, okay, you have then tuna canning, sardine canning technology coming online, canneries being built, and people are getting a taste for chicken of the sea. And Issei fishermen are at the right place at the right time, bringing over then their technology. Okay, so you have these bamboo poles, some of them 2, 3, 4, then hauling in these huge tuna fish. Okay, and so Issei fishermen are pioneering then these bamboo poles, a barbless hook called a squid, and live bait chumming techniques. Keep in mind, there was an existing and a vibrant fishing community already in San Diego, but combining that with the tuna canneries, the increase in demand for canned tuna, and Issei fishermen and their wives and daughters who are working in the canneries. And you have a very symbiotic relationship. So, Issei men, itinerant laborers, they're transitioning to then farmers, getting pieces of property and farming them themselves, okay? And now they want to start roots. Yes, initially many of them were sojourners. They were going to come 3, 5 years, make some money, go back home. Okay, but they came, they said, hey, this isn't a bad place. We want to stay. Not only that, is we want to start families. Okay, but where are they going to find wives? You have anti-miscegenation laws against race mixing. Okay, and so they contact their families back in Japan. And then you have the picture bride system. And I think in September 13th, then the Picture Bride movie was shown here at the library. And if you haven't seen it, I know you can borrow it. It's really interesting, and it focuses on the Hawaiian plantations and picture brides. And so in the far left is then Nobue Kusui, a hospital nurse from Wakayama, and she marries Takejiro Kodama. And they do it by proxy, and the woman then comes to the United States, already married, signed the papers. They get the official marriage at Angel Island, and then they come down to Southern California. Okay, so the Kodama family farmed in Imperial Valley for decades. Now their grandson, Kenny Kodama, settled in Chula Vista. Now, Catherine Tasaki, who was then a Nisei child, okay, they pose their children for formal photographs in the kimono, and they're sending them pictures back to Japan. Now, her daughter, ends up then marrying Kenny Kodama. Okay, so you have these families, they're already looking at it within the San Diego community. They're third, some of them fourth generation today. So now you have the picture brides, and my grandmother was actually a picture bride, okay, during the 1930s, because she had an American passport. She was born in Hawaii, educated in Japan. She could come back to the Hawaiian Islands to marry my grandfather. And she didn't know anything about him except his family. Riding on the boat, thought he was an okay guy. She had a choice of stay in Maui, go to Seattle. She said, I'll stay in Hawaii, okay? And so the picture bride system was a very common way for men to start families. So you have the Nisei generation. But at the same time that you have these Issei farmers, fishermen, small businesses putting down roots, you also have an anti-immigrant backlash. So that same Kia and Hosaka family in Mission Valley, they're getting too prosperous. And so you have an anti-immigrant sentiment, and they're passing the California state. They're saying, vote yes on this proposition in 1913 so we can stop that invasion, those invasion of Japanese farmers. And instead of saying Japanese farmers, you have these code words that are very much targeting then Asian immigrant population. They say aliens ineligible for citizenship because Issei could not become naturalized citizens. Chinese immigrants could not become naturalized citizens. Filipino immigrants could not become naturalized citizens. But these laws are definitely targeting those Issei farming families in Mission Valley, in the Tijuana River Valley area, in Oceanside. And they're saying, you can't own land, and you can only lease it for 3 years. So people are saying, well, we can't own land because we're aliens ineligible for citizenship, but guess who are citizens? Our children. We'll put the name in the land of our children, or the land in the name of our children. Okay, so they do that. They start doing that. Or we'll form holding companies. Or we'll have then Caucasian partners. Okay, so now they continue to at least try to be profitable. But citizens of California come back again in 1920. And they actually then start going after farmers. Now there is this interesting case in Riverside with the Harada family, where the father bought the house in the name of the son. And the neighbors got angry, brought a case against him. And this went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, no, it really is for the sake of the children. Okay, so now property, you could. But all this farmland, we can still go after you. Okay. So now those Issei fishermen, and many of them are in Mexico, sometimes they're in and out, the fishing game, and the California government says, well, if you're not going to become a citizen, you don't have any intent of becoming a citizen, you can't get a fishing license. Okay. And there's a lot of skirmishes, that gets defeated, and they come back with, well, you have to live here for a year in the States, in California, in order to get a fishing license. So the Issei fisherman in Mexico, he's not living here for a year, okay? And so then all of these then have to be battled through in the courts. And so there are very much targeted restriction on Issei fishermen, on then farmers. And of course, in 1924, you have the federal immigration law. And keep in mind, there's not only anti-immigrant forces within the state of California, but also federal legislation. 1907, 1908, Japan and the United States have a gentleman's agreement because of then all the Japanese laborers coming in. And so they agree that Japan won't let laborers leave Japan, and the United States will not accept Japanese laborers. But you still had the picture brides coming in. So in 1920, they get another agreement, Japan, US. Japan's not going to let the picture brides immigrate, and the United States won't accept them. And so because of federal immigration laws, there are these clear demarcations in terms of then Issei families, Nisei children. So while things are going on, with state anti-immigrant laws, federal legislation, Nisei children are growing up. They're American. They're going to then schools in La Jolla. They're going to schools then downtown San Diego. They're going to middle school. And this is the Yamaguchi family in 1929. And they are in Pacific Beach, and the family is farming a truck farm. And they seem to be doing really well. And then they have a bunch of kids. And the parents post a sign. Our ancestors are Japanese. We are Japanese Americans. For the honor of our ancestors and the pride of America, let us hold hands, encourage each other, and study. So, if you take a look at the kids, and I've met a couple of, now they're, grandmas and grandpas, okay? They don't look too happy, okay? And if you were a child, and like many American children, your parents are saying, go stand over there. They put up a sign in a language that the neighbors cannot read. Again, Pacific Beach, there's a handful of Japanese American families, but mostly not Japanese American families. And they tell you, go stand by the sign. And you're like, really? Okay, but their parents are making a statement. We are here. We want to be seen, and we are selling roots here. And not only that, we are Japanese Americans and study. Okay, and many Nisei children do study. And that's something I can really kind of relate to, because my grandparents, who were very much like Issei, all they would tell me was study hard, study hard. Not we're proud of you, not I love you or anything like that. No, study hard. Okay? And they did study. So Nisei young adults are joining the Japanese American Citizens League. They're having picnics at Pacific Beach. And this is July 2nd, 1939. And they're having fun. They're at the beach. Okay. In downtown San Diego, around the Fifth and Island intersections, there are over 35 Japanese-run businesses, and this is a Yokohama Laundry. And if you take a look at that, you have the husband, the wife, a couple of women, and you also have then in your far left what looks to be like a Mexican or Mexican-American woman. Okay, so the Japanese immigrant communities, the Japanese Americans in downtown San Diego, they're also among then Chinese shops, secondhand clothes stores then run by Caucasians, Filipino barbers, Mexican Americans. So although you have a lot of Japanese immigrant and Japanese American businesses in the Fifth and Island area, it's also a very much mixed community. So in San Diego, you have the downtown business section for the Japanese American community. You have then the fishing community, then in Barrio Logan area. You have then these farmers in Mission Valley, Oceanside, down in Chula Vista, Tijuana Valley area. And the farmers then are coming in once a week to pick up provisions, do some shopping, get their bag of rice, their tofu, their other supplies. And then December 7th, 1941. Okay, Japan did a surprise attack on the Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, and now the United States was involved in World War II. Okay, so December 7th, but it's not until February 19th, 1942, that President Roosevelt, FDR, signs Executive Order 9066. And remember February 19th, because we're going to come back to that date. So, with Executive Order 9066, he basically delegates to the military to secure the West Coast. General in charge, a guy named General DeWitt, secure the West Coast, southern border of Arizona, and do what you need to do in order to keep the West Coast safe. And DeWitt believes that the Issei are very much spies and saboteurs, and their Nisei children are vipers just like their parents. Okay? So in San Diego, April 1st, the military order goes out, gets posted all around. You gotta move out. April 7th, then people gather at Santa Fe Depot and they get on the trains. And this is where you start then concentration camps USA. And I say concentration camps not like the death camps in Europe during World War II, but a place where civilians were held with no due process, without any type of actual charges. And although there's a lot of suspicion and all kinds of rumors in the papers that the Japanese population in Hawaii helped then the Japanese pilots and guided them to Pearl Harbor. There was never any charge of actual espionage or spying by any persons of Japanese ancestry. In fact, the people that were prosecuted and went to prison were two Caucasian guys. All right. So this is then Fusa Tsumagari on the left-hand side, and her brother, Yuki, and he was a student at Berkeley. He had to leave, come back to San Diego, and then now he's leaving with his family. And initially they thought they were going to Owens Valley, where Manzanar was. And then this is also Tetsuzo, sometimes called Tets, or Ted Hirasaki, okay? And how many of you have been to the exhibit, Call to Serve? Okay, if you haven't, definitely get over there, because this tells another part of the story and involves then the children's librarian called Clara Breed, Miss Breed, everybody called her. And Tets, I'll call him Tets, sometimes he was called Ted, he grew up in the East County Library. He'd hang out there. His dad was a fisherman, turned then to be a barber. And Tets would hang out at the library, and Miss Breed would give him all kinds of books, introduce him to things like the encyclopedia, the dictionary. And on that day, then she's there to take him to the Santa Fe Depot. The FBI authorities had come by and picked up his dad. And Ted is 21 years old, or Tets is 21 years old, and he and his sister Yaiko then are basically on their own. They don't know where their dad is. He is in somewhere, okay? And if you look at the shadow there, that's Miss Breed, then Clara Breed taking the pictures, okay? So she goes to the depot and she's handing out postcards, okay? Handing out candy, and she's telling, write to me. I want to know what's going on. I want to know where you're going. Stamps. And they write back. And one of the letters says, thanks a million for coming down to the depot. We left San Diego at 1:15 a.m. Thursday. So they were there Wednesday, and they didn't leave the depot until Thursday. And another letter writer is saying, there was a sudden change in our going to Owens Valley, but we arrived safely at Santa Anita, which we call Santa Japanita. Reached Santa Anita, 3 a.m. Santa Anita is a beautiful place. You could see the big mountains in the morning. When you could see the shadows of the mountains, it looks like the great pyramids of Egypt. Our camp is right near the racetracks of Santa Anita. The stables that horses used to live, they cleared them out, and now we live in them. They gave us many things that we need, like beds, blankets, brooms, and buckets. So we are getting along fine. When we eat, we always have to get in a long line, about 3 blocks long. Okay, so there are lines for everything. Lines for the showers, lines for the bathrooms. Okay, but Tets, Fusa, Yuki, they're trying to make the best of it. What else can they do? So several months at Santa Anita, then they get sent to Poston. Have any of you heard of Poston? Okay, so if you go up to the 10, go east right after you cross the California-Arizona border and you cross the Colorado River, you take an immediate left, go north, and you run into Poston. It's out in the middle of nowhere on the Colorado River Indian Tribal Reservation. And there were 2 camps on Indian reservations, Native American Indian lands. And that was because the Bureau of Indian Affairs head, a man named John Collier, wanted then people to come in and develop agriculture, develop the land. He saw it as an opportunity to gain then economic development, agricultural development. Not only that, water rights. Okay. So everybody has sort of an agenda, but these camps are out in the middle of nowhere. Manzanar, Tule Lake, Topaz, out in the middle of nowhere. Gila River. And so Poston, Arizona was the third largest city during World War II with a population of 18,000. And this is an aerial view. Then there were 3 camps, Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3. And the photographer who took this, Paul Shintaku, cameras were forbidden, prohibited. But somehow gets a camera in, and he starts taking pictures. They start making yearbooks, and you can tell these pictures because they have like a really interesting feel to them. So the Japanese American Historical Society, thanks to the Shintaku family who donated the pictures, so now they have these pictures that we can share with people. So in order to get into camp, you gotta go through the military police. Okay, you have to go through then authorities. And you have Nisei soldiers who are coming back to camp, who want to see their parents, who have to get permission from the camp director. Issei women found jobs as cooks. So Nisei worked in the recreation department, and the WRA then, they have all kinds of jobs. And for an unskilled labor, it's $12 a month. Skilled labor is $16 a month. And a professional employee like a doctor or a nurse is $19 a month. They didn't make more than the U.S. Army private. Okay. But as the Issei observed the impact of incarceration for adults, as the injury that was made to their hearts will take a long time to heal. So now, kids needed to go to school. So there was a brickyard, and they made bricks, built schools, built a gymnasium. And Clara Breed's friends are still writing to her throughout the whole time. She's sending them books, candy. They're writing to her, they're sending him her, carved birds. They're sending her then carved things that people go out to find wood, and they start carving. Tess carves her this beautiful nameplate. Take a look at it in the exhibit. And Tess writes, "The dust storms in 1943 came during the 3rd week of January and lasted for 3 days. We had the coldest morning yet when the temperature dropped to 20 degrees. That whole day, ice was on the ground. Then it began to rain. It poured cloudburst after cloudburst for 3 days. The dust just turned into the stickiest mud I have ever seen." So you had these drop in the temperature. Then during the summer, 110, 115 degrees. And it's at Poston that you have a double roof to try to at least, decrease some of the sun, the heat. And so Tess is writing to her about things that happened, the riot that happened at Santa Anita. Okay, she's talking about his job. Okay, talking about then, when are they going to get out? And so, as soon as they're in 1942, 1943, the government is saying again, we got to feed, house, take care of, make sure they have recreation. Then over 110,000. And you have anywhere from 110,000 to 120,000 because, again, people are having babies. Okay? So now the government wants people to leave, but not back to the West Coast. Go find a job in Denver, Minneapolis. Not only that, there is a labor shortage. So young men and some young women then get out and are doing migrant labor, harvesting sugar beets. And so now the government says, we really want people to get out. So you fill out this long questionnaire, and question number 27 and 28 were very difficult, because it was kind of confusing, because they didn't really qualify or clarify that, no, women, this doesn't count for women, okay, in terms of going to combat. All right? Doesn't count for old people. And so there was a lot of confusion, and until that all got kind of cleared up, you had a lot of anxiety, stress, especially with question number 27 and 28. 27, are you willing to serve in the armed forces of the U.S. in combat duty wherever ordered? And they're going, you say fathers are like in their 50s. Are they going to go be put on the front line? 28, will you swear unqualified allegiance to the United States of America and faithfully defend the U.S. from any or all attack by foreign or domestic forces, and forswear any form of allegiance or obedience to the Japanese emperor or any other foreign government or organization? This assumes that you are obedient to the Japanese emperor. And especially for Issei, if they said yes, yes, they can't become an American citizen, but then they're forswearing their Japanese citizenship, then what are they citizens of? And so you had a lot of stress, anxiety on this. And many people said yes, yes, get out of camp, get a job in Denver. Others said no, no. And in Heart Mountain, Wyoming, they organized. And they said, if you let our parents go back, regain our civil liberties, yes, we'll say yes, yes. But they were branded draft dodgers, and then they went to federal prison and prosecuted. Okay. So now you have then all the people that said no, no, or many of them, get shipped to a special camp, Tule Lake, up in Northern California. Then the people at Tule Lake who said yes, yes, they get shipped out to some of the other camps because they wanted to segregate the troublemakers at Tule Lake. And Tule Lake just became one big, unhappy mess. Okay, and they had to end up sending the military, they had tanks there. Okay, but people at Poston, many of the young men said yes, yes. Tet said yes, yes, and he's writing to Miss Breed. I am proud to say that the San Diego group has the most volunteers than any other group in camp. Altogether in our block, we have just about 15 volunteers, including yours truly, which makes about the best record yet. And Tet's, if you notice in the original picture, he was holding his shoulder in a sling because he was recovering from a shoulder surgery, a shoulder injury. And he is so excited to volunteer, but he gets rejected because of his shoulder injury, and he's just devastated. And so he says, well, my dad trained me how to be a barber, so I'll start cutting people's hair. And after 2 years, his dad and his family are finally reunited, at least Tetsu and Chiyomatsu Hirasaki, who Clara Breed was writing then to try to get them reunited. Okay. So Nisei served in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and they are known as the Purple Heart Battalion because they are the most decorated unit in the U.S. military for its size and span of time. You have Nisei, especially those with language skills. They get recruited into the Military Intelligence Service, MIS, and they are interrogators and interpreters in the Pacific Theater in Burma. Okay. And the picture is in a Staff Sergeant Jim Matsumoto. And in an oral history collected by Don Estes, he says, K Company started the assault with over 200 men and ended with 8. In all, over 800 casualties were suffered by the 442nd in less than a week to rescue the lost battalion, which was a Texas battalion that was caught behind enemy German lines. And the 442 was sent in to rescue them. So Matsumoto was awarded a Bronze Star for his bravery in rescuing a wounded soldier. Oh. Did any of you see the model barracks downstairs? Yeah, okay. So in 1991, Frank Wada and his family, he got a couple family friends together, and he says, I'm going to teach my children and grandchildren about where we lived at Poston. Okay? So he got these families together, and they built a model barrack in 1991 for the Poston 3 reunion that you see downstairs. And Frank Wada was one of the first to volunteer. And due to heavy casualties in his unit and his leadership skills, Wada went from 2nd Scout to acting platoon sergeant in less than a month in the Rome-Arno campaign. He was wounded in October 1944, then liberating the French town of Brières. And once he got well again, he toured Italy. And that's him in St. Mark's Square, befriending then an Italian boy, and they're feeding pigeons. Now, while Nisei are volunteering, then they're being drafted, there's talk of, oh, maybe the US government will let Nisei soldiers to the West Coast. Maybe they'll let loyal Japanese Americans return to the West Coast. And San Diego civic leaders get wind of this, and they start saying, no way. They pass resolutions saying, we do not want you back, do not come back. We think you should be stripped of your citizenship, says the San Diego Chamber of Commerce. The city council approved a June 8th, 1943 resolution that says, be it resolved by the Council of the City of San Diego having the right to appeal to the President and the Congress of the United States for protection against the danger involved in permitting the Japanese now concentrated in restricted areas to be released there from and returned to our midst, that the council does hereby protest against permitting any Japanese to return to this area while fighting this war against Japan. So the civic leaders are definitely against then the Japanese American community. And this is where Clara Breed. Now keep in mind, she's the children's librarian. She works for the city. They are her bosses that are passing this resolution, and she starts writing articles in these library journals, saying, hey, these Nisei, they're loyal, they're good people, okay? And you have, then she's taking excerpts from those letters and putting it into these articles to humanize then these Nisei children and young adults. And she's saying one factor has been the gradual cautious release of carefully selected young women to attend middle Western colleges or to take jobs. That's Yuki, Fusa's brother. He got out and ended up going to medical school. This policy deserves the support of all intelligent people, for these young people have committed no crime except to have the wrong ancestors. Okay, so she entitles one of her articles, Americans with the Wrong Ancestors. And so at the same time that the city council is passing these resolutions, Clara Breed is publishing these articles in Horn Book magazine, which is a very influential children's book magazine. And Breed concludes with, President Franklin Roosevelt praised the War Department for the creation of the all-Nisei combat units by writing, the principles on which this country was founded and by which it has always governed is that Americanism is a matter of the mind and heart. Americanism is not and never was a matter of race or ancestry. Okay, Tatis just hit a home run. So not only is there this local pushback against any suggestion of Japanese Americans returning, Japanese immigrants returning, but you also have it being fought in the courts. Keep in mind, Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, so the executive was for it. Congress passed a law, outlining punishment and what would happen, and the Supreme Court weighed in, and they weighed in on the side of the government. You have 4 court cases, Hirabayashi, Yasui, Korematsu, and Endo. And this is where I make a plug for come next week, Wednesday, to Peter Irons and David Lloyd, because they should be talking about these cases. Okay? And what will be interesting, especially with Peter Irons, because he was the lead lawyer that got Hirabayashi, Yasui, and Korematsu cases then dismissed. Okay? And he worked with then Sansei lawyers. And so ask him, any of them coming, I'll definitely be coming. Okay, and I'm coming the next week to see Linda and then what's his name, Mr. Kubota. Okay, and ask him, because Fred Korematsu's case and ex parte Endo, Mitsui Endo's case, come down at the same time in December 1944. In the case of Korematsu, Hirabayashi and Yasui, on very narrow grounds, supported the government's curfew. In the case of Fred Korematsu, they supported the government. Now with the Endo case, they said a clearly loyal person could not be held. Okay, and Mitsui Endo worked for the state of California. She took a loyalty oath when she got the job. Not only that, her brother was then serving in the military with the 442nd. Okay, so now ex parte Endo comes down at the same time that Korematsu comes down. And the US government says, starting January 1st, 1945, we're gonna let people come back. Okay. Now, coming back, and this is where another view of Poston, people are saying, what do we do now? Should we go west to our old nest, or should we go east to explore a new land? There may be a big storm tomorrow. And this is a poem written by Elizabeth Kikuchi. Later on, she married Joe Yamada. Her mother wrote this poem. And now they got to debate what to do. Do we come back to a hostile San Diego? But will other areas be just as hostile? Okay. The Oyama family decided to come back. They had land, and they run into a big storm. Oyama v. California in 1948. Now, Oyama, the father, bought land in the name of his son, Fred. And after the war, the district attorney starts going after nurseries, farmers, basically escheating their land. You're against then the alien land law. And Oyama, along with a lawyer from the ACLU, this goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and they decide it's a 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law issue. And this chips away at the alien land law, which is finally then defeated in 1952 with another case involving a Japanese American family. And Oyama then was a farmer in Chula Vista. So now you got to come back, rebuild your religious organization. Japanese Christian Church restarts. Buddhist Temple of San Diego have to reclaim their building, which was torched by an arsonist and then taken over by an African American USO. And so you still have segregation here in San Diego, okay, a black USO. And Ocean View United Church of Christ, so they got to restart and go back to the fact that I cannot dance Obon. This is then Obon, where you stand in a circle, it looks more like a square, and you're then going around and dancing. And I can get the one about shoveling coal a little bit, okay, but but I go, I eat, I watch, I have fun. San Diegans then went back to picnicking, okay? And this is then a picnic at the First Japanese Congregational Church, Pioneer Ocean View United Church of Christ. Okay. Now, the Nisei are having children. They're trying to get on with their lives. They're getting jobs. You have an influx into San Diego of college-educated Nisei engineers. They're working for General Dynamics, later on General Atomics. Okay, and in the 1970s, people start talking again and saying, hey, we want to get together and connect again. And you had then Poston Camp 3 reunion in 1975, and they started having every other year reunions. And it wasn't just the high school. They expanded it to then everybody in Poston Camp 3, because there were 3 camps, 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Now, as the community got more secure, as the civil rights movement is taking hold, Sansei children, third-generation children, are asking their parents, what happened during World War II? What is this I hear? And their parents are telling them. Sometimes they don't want to talk about it, but the Sansei are also organizing. Nisei themselves are saying, we were wronged. And not only that, non-Japanese American allies are also then pushing for what's called redress and reparations. It was finally passed, H.R. 442 in 1988, signed into law by Ronald Reagan. Of all people, that's really interesting. Okay, and him finally signing it had to do with his experience in working with Japanese American soldiers on a movie in Hollywood during World War II, is in part what some of the story goes. Okay. Not only that, but you had Japanese American politicians, congressmen, United States senators, people who were in camp themselves. And Sparky Matsunaga, United States Senator from Hawaii, Daniel Inouye, United States Senator from Hawaii, who were in the 442. Okay, so 1988, US government issued a formal apology, and then you have the $20,000 payments to every person then who was living at the time the law was signed. Now, fast forward. After the war, Clara Breed becomes head librarian, and she oversees then the building of some 15 plus branch libraries, okay, in places like San Carlos. Okay, they used to have a bookmobile that went out to San Carlos, but now they have a library. That's good, because that's the one I go to. And in 1991, the Poston 3 reunion then honors Clara Breed, and you have then Catherine Tasaki, who was one of the letter writers. She's like 10 years old at the time. She becomes a library staff person in the Chula Vista system. You have Luis Ogawa, who didn't come back to San Diego, I believe, but they're all getting back together. And in 1991, they're honoring Clara Breed, and Frank Wada, with his family, is building the barracks downstairs. And Clara Breed goes to the exhibit, and it's this wonderful exhibit, and she sees the barracks, and she writes him a letter saying, "This was so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing this with you." And as the Nisei get older, in retirement age, okay, they're thinking about what is their legacy. And out of the Poston 3 reunion comes the creation of the Japanese American Historical Society of San Diego. And on your left, then, is Don Estes, who is a pioneering historian and my mentor and my former office mate. And he's part of a founding member of the Japanese American Historical Society of San Diego, along with then Ben Sagawa, who married Catherine Tasaki, who was that little baby in the picture. So that's the same organization then that has a small display there. Pick up a newsletter, free newsletter, take a look at it. Read about our history. Not only that, they're creating then the Day of Remembrance, February 19th, the day that Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066. And this is then the Poston 1 who took the lead in 1992. They dedicated the Poston Monument, Memorial Monument, then on the Poston Reservation. And they had to get permission with the Crit Colorado River Indian tribal leaders. And if you go to Poston, you'll see that right on the side of the road. If you blink, you miss it. Make sure to take a look. Okay. And so people are thinking about, what is our legacy? They want to say we were here. They want to be seen. And in 2017, then you have Saburo Muraoka Elementary School opened. And Saburo Muraoka then was a civic leader, longtime civic leader involved in the U.S.-Japan City Friendship Organizations. And he and his father, Fukutaro, were pioneering celery farmers in Chula Vista. The Muraoka family is still in Chula Vista. They still have land, and they're running then Muraoka Enterprises. And you have an elementary school named after him, Saburo Muraoka. Even though the board always mangles his name, that's okay. It's a name on a school, and I love it. Okay. I wanted to end with this. Where are we? Okay. And we looked at then the Japanese American experience in San Diego. Okay, but we also looked at then the letters that were created during the war. Those letters get donated to the Japanese American National Museum, but the Historical Society here has a couple, so take a look at the archive. Okay, and those letters then kind of go national. There's a book, Dear Miss Breed, written by Joan Oppenheim for middle school and young adults. And then last year, another book, a picture book, a children's book was written, and it was called, it's sitting there and there, Write to Me, and it was selected as the one book San Diego for children. And so you get these publications that incorporate the story with Miss Breed and these Nisei children letter writers. Then you get the U.S. Postal Museum creates an exhibit, of course, letters, writing. And then also I really like about this is This is like a 21st century take on the letters between Miss Breed and the Nisei children and young adults.
But I'm sure when this war is over, there will be no racial discrimination, and we would have to debt for the great principles of democracy.
That's right. That's why we're free.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate your time here, and really thankful to see so many people here. Make sure you take a look at the exhibit. It's open during library hours most of the time, and it's a really interesting exhibit. Make sure you get downstairs to the barracks. And if you don't buy my book, check it out at the library. They have at least one copy right downstairs. Thank you very much for coming.